Okay. And there we go. Okay, there's that. Yep. Here I am. On this first day of spring. There we go, JR. Yep. All right, I was looking down, make sure the connection was there. Great. Okay, folks, we're going to be starting momentarily. Let me just check something. There we go. Okay. There they are. Let me just find that. Just want to check one thing. Okay. All right, folks, we're starting in 2 minutes. 2 minutes, excuse me. Some late news following up on. First day of spring. Downtown, a lot of excitement downtown with the NCAA tournament. And also big developments with the retrial. We're going to talk to attorney Stephanie Murphy coming up momentarily. First up. Downtown, a lot of excitement. Sounds like someone I know. A lot of excitement. All right, enough of that. There we go. All right. And let me just double check that. There we go. Okay. Folks, we're 1 minute out. 1 minute out. At 1:06 on this Thursday, folks, first day of spring. Good afternoon. This is the real news. Now, again, remember, you can listen AM 1380, 99.9 FM. Now, right now, we are live. You can watch the program. You can listen on the website, dpetro.com. But right now, as we speak, you can see us live on our Facebook page, on YouTube, and on X. And what people like about that is you can watch it on demand. I constantly hear from people. By the way, the numbers when we finish this hour and then where they end up are night and day, sometimes fivefold, sometimes even more than that. So remember, if you ever miss this hour, the real news, you can tune in. Again, we're live on our YouTube channel under live. It's always posted on X and then, of course, on Facebook. Folks, this portion of the program is brought to you by Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, criminal defense attorneys, 50 years combined Rhode Island criminal defense experience. Your fight becomes their fight. Full weight, firm behind every case. Call them 401 228 8271. 401 228 8271. Marin, Barrett, and Murphy. You can find them on both Facebook and Instagram. And joining us right now from Marin, Barrett, and Murphy is, in fact, we talk to her every week, is attorney Stephanie Murphy. And good afternoon, Stephanie.
Good afternoon, John.
Stephanie, I want to start off. You had the St. Patrick's Day parade this past Saturday in Newport. Big crowd. Certainly a number of people got in trouble. But what also caught the attention of a lot of people, where even the Newport police put out a video where then they were addressing, were the fact that there were some individuals, I believe they were juveniles, but they were arrested, detained. And what really stood out is video of the police bringing them into custody, detaining them. And so it brings up a question of reasonable force. So a lot of people have asked me if we would address the act of reasonable force in a situation, and something like the Newport parade seemed to draw a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at reasonable force for a police officer, you also have to look at the surrounding circumstances where the police find themselves in. And St. Patrick's Day in Newport is a huge day in Newport. Lots of people are there for the parade. Lots of people go out afterwards and into the night. So there's an increase in the number of people, increase in number of crowds, increase in the amount of people drinking. And I know the cops were really trying to, lock down some laws in terms of, making sure that there weren't underage people drinking, that they were not open containers, disorderly, drunk driving. So the police definitely had their hands full. But in regards to the excessive force or reasonable force in this case, I think the whole circumstance of the day and how the people are acting definitely comes into play, especially St. Patrick's Day in Newport and everything like that. But I know the police chief, responded to the social media and put out videos and also put out a statement. And the Newport's police department right now is that the officers did use reasonable force. But what is interesting in cases like this is sometimes the Attorney General's office does get involved, and they will also be an investigator in this. And they're also more of a neutral party to take a look at it. So I don't think it's been escalated to the Attorney General's department yet, but in many cases in the past, it has, and the AG's office have taken a look, and they came up with their own decisions in many cases.
Stephanie, if you could just touch on, many times, and you see this out in the video, the police want to bring someone forward. The individual starts saying, and they'll say it 20 times, I wasn't doing anything. Mm-hmm. And in this particular situation, granted, maybe, it was younger individuals, but what should someone do? They're in a situation, maybe it's a crowd, maybe there's drinking. People don't understand what a crowd, how that can change the dynamic of how police are going to react when it starts to become, 15 people for every one police officer. But what should a parade goer or a party goer or whatever it may be, what should someone do in that situation?
Well, I think, first of all, they should make sure that they're abiding by the law and look like they're abiding by the law. So in terms of open containers and stuff like that, making sure they're careful with, the Newport City ordinances and what they can and can't do. They also have to be careful of how they're acting. Sometimes in a crowd with drinking and excitement, people can be a lot rowdier than they normally would. So in terms of a police officer coming up on a rowdy crowd, their perception of what's going on is probably, a little heightened in terms of how they need to react. So if someone's in that situation, just like a police officer, everyone should try to de-escalate the situation, whether it's, not not approaching an officer, maybe taking a step back, having a conversation, asking the officer to like come over to a corner to have a conversation to explain what's going on. But there's a big difference between having a conversation with a police officer and yelling at a police officer, or having a bunch of people yell at a police officer. So I think for both the police and anyone in that situation, I think the best thing to do is try to de-escalate a situation, and then reasonable minds can definitely, come to an agreement about what's going on. But if the situation's escalated, that's when I think all the problems happen.
One final question on this. And again, folks, it's attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, what would be an occasion where something happens, where someone may have a case that excessive force was used? In Providence, we still have that officer, Hanley, that's on trial. He had the guy down, clearly lost his temper. He's punching him, saying, you asked for this. But what would be a situation that someone may find themselves in? And this happens unexpected. Someone's out, suddenly something happens. But what would set off alarm bells that excessive force was used?
So I think if the person's detained and kind of helpless to defend themselves, meaning they can't walk away, they're in handcuffs, that they're not able to protect themselves, and that's when the force is used, I would think that would be uncalled for. If a person's in handcuffs or the back of the police car, they're not going anywhere. There's a separation. The officer could shut the door. I think it really comes into play when somebody's being detained and they can't protect themselves, walk away, turn away. That's when I see a lot of the excessive force and the claims for excessive force happening.
There was a high-profile situation just this week in Cranston, and the details that we have, this man's home, he claims he heard someone going through his trash cans. He comes outside to confront the person. The individual apparently has a knife on him. A struggle ensues. The homeowner is then stabbed multiple times. The suspect's even tased, taken into custody. I think I would be very curious to hear, and I get this question asked, if you are a homeowner, what are your rights as far as protecting your property, stand your ground? I actually even heard from someone related to the suspect saying, hey, he was minding his own business, and next thing you know, the guy comes charging at him. So he was just defending himself when he took out the knife. But what about the stand your ground laws in Rhode Island that I believe they're very different than where they may be, say, in Florida or Texas?
Yeah, so in Rhode Island, a homeowner has the absolute right to defend themselves and their property if someone's trying to enter their property. Rhode Island has something called a castle doctrine, where they follow a version of the castle doctrine. And people know that to mean that homeowners are able to use force, including deadly force, if they reasonably believe they are in danger of death or seriously injury. So Rhode Island does go along with the castle doctrine, but there is also a duty to retreat. Unlike some states, stand your ground laws in Rhode Island generally require a person to retreat if they could do so safely. So in this case, if the person's outside of their house in their garbage cans on their property, the question might come into play of whether or not the homeowner had a duty to retreat into the house. But in this case, I think there was a daughter home, and so all those things are taken into consideration when determining what legal rights you have as a homeowner. But you definitely have the legal right to protect yourself and to protect your home from somebody coming into it.
And many times people seem to be confused by that. Just because someone comes on your property. Now, again, I have no evidence to believe the homeowner did anything wrong. But let's just say if someone were to go onto your property, I know, many years ago, we had the G and Quiddy situation in Cranston where you had a firefighter. There was a dispute. He punched his neighbor who was yelling at his children. In Giaquitti's mind, he came into my house and he fired and killed his neighbor. I'm glad you pointed that out. There is a limit of reasonable force that if you found someone on your property, it doesn't give you the right to then, take their life, or in this particular case, if this had, well, just touch on that.
Non-lethal force is definitely permitted to stop a trespasser, to stop somebody on your property, to stop somebody in your house. But there's also a duty to retreat too. So if the person's on your property and you can retreat into your house and call the police, you keep everyone safe. You don't get into, an altercation with that person. And that would probably be the safest thing to do. If you can retreat retreat, maybe take a video out to record the person and call the police. That would definitely be my advice. But you are able to use force if needed. Non-lethal force is permitted, but deadly force is only justified if you reasonably believe in that situation that is needed to protect yourself or to protect somebody else from seriously bodily harm or death.
Now, there's another case this week, and it's in New Bedford, where this woman is charged. She was trying to throw drugs over the fence to, I believe, her boyfriend, who's an inmate. What about people, just general guidelines that are going, from what I understand, I saw a quote which she thought, well, it's legal. I thought it's no different than throwing cigarettes over. But what about someone that's going to visit a family member who is incarcerated? What are the rules? And people may not understand. You can't just bring drugs or try to get them any type of contraband.
Well, I mean, the loved ones who are coming to see their loved ones or visit somebody at the ACI or at any prison, I mean, they have an obligation not to break the law and not to bring in anything contraband or that's not permitted. Basically, when they agree to come in and be a visitor, they're agreeing to all the rules of the prison or the ACI or whatever facility they're at. But not only are they jeopardizing themselves, but they're also jeopardizing the inmate. In this case, I believe they searched through phone records and listened to phone calls. And there's going to be problems not only for the girlfriend that was doing this, but also for the inmate and asking for it and everything like that. So it blows my mind that somebody would even try to do that. But people do. And we've had instances, throughout the nation of people smuggling drugs in and smuggling, all sorts of different contraband, whether it's cell phones, drugs. I mean, Rhode Island's not immune to those problems also.
Folks, again, it's attorney Stephanie Murphy, and now it's time for Murphy's Law. This is a story in the news that Stephanie has picked out. What do you have for us this week, Attorney Murphy?
So I've been listening and trying to keep up to date with that Idaho with a murder trial that's going to be going on in the near future for students that were killed in their house. And what I find interesting is whenever I have a case, whether it's a big case or a small case, the one thing I definitely try to do for my client is, as I'm preparing for trial, try to suppress any evidence that's harmful to my case. So in a DUI, if there's DUI readings, I try to suppress, the readings on legal grounds. There's a lot of different ways to try to suppress evidence and to get evidence not introduced in a trial that could harm your client. And this week, there was an interesting story about the defense attorneys trying to suppress evidence of some Amazon purchases that Brian made about 7 or 8 months prior to the murders happening. And I just found that very interesting because that information, if it came in, I believe would be very damaging. The Amazon purchase with the knife that he purchased through Amazon, I believe matches what they found on the murder scene. So that's a huge piece of evidence. If the defense is able to keep that out, that's game changing for, both sides and everything like that. Also in that case, they're trying to keep out the fact that one of the eyewitness, one of the other roommates, identified the person with bushy eyebrows. So all these little pieces of evidence that taken alone might not add much. If the defense can keep these little bits of information out, it can definitely be a game changer for the defense and how the case goes when it goes before the jury.
Stephanie, again, if someone has a question, you're always open to a free consultation and maybe try to give someone some guidance on whether or not they need some legal advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's a civil case, whether it's personal injury, family law, criminal law, myself and the attorneys here are definitely always happy to talk to anyone and go through your issues and just listen to what you have to say and point you in the right direction or give any help we can.
All right, folks, again, attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, excellent as always, and we'll talk to you again.
Thanks, John. Have a great day.
All right, folks, there we go. Attorney Stephanie Murphy right here on the John DePietro Show. Now, I do want to get to also, as I mentioned, some of the news of the day. There is an update regarding the doctor. Governor McKee right now is also under tremendous fire, and I want to point that out. But I also want to stay on schedule. Folks, remember this portion of the program at 1:20, and this is the real news. And it's brought to you by Propane Plus. Call them today for all your propane needs. Call Propane Plus in Rhode Island, 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. For Propane Plus, remember, you can always find them online at propaneplus.com, residential or commercial. Give them a call today or go online. You just type in your zip code, request a quote, residential, commercial, online at propaneplus.com. Now, the latest on this doctor, that you notice that, and I mentioned this, that the local media has kind of dropped off the story. There's also a local story out by the Rhode Island Current. They're not that well known, but they have some pretty seasoned reporters behind it. And the title of the story, and what we're talking about, is this doctor who, Brown University professor, also a kidney doctor at Rhode Island Hospital, went back to Lebanon. Now, as we talked about, the local story was, oh my goodness, like, how could this happen? The Trump immigration policy is out of control. Here you have this woman that just went back to, I mean, it seemed innocent enough, went to visit her family. Suddenly she arrives at Logan Airport. They won't let her back in and she gets deported back. Now, that was the local story. The story then we learned from Homeland Security was she back in Lebanon? And she is a citizen of Lebanon. Was she visiting family? She was. But it seems the main purpose of her trip was to attend the funeral of a terror leader, one of the leader of Hezbollah, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike. So she went back for that. She had photos of not only him, this terror leader, but also the supreme leader of Iran. And then what I found the most interesting, when Homeland Security questioned, now again, she's been in our area, I believe, since 2018, professor at Brown University, doctor, some kind of a kidney specialist, I believe, at Rhode Island Hospital. But what really caught their attention was when they were asking her about these individuals. Now, it's not a secret that this was the leader of Hezbollah. It was a huge funeral. It's almost comparable a little bit. This isn't going to be a great analogy, but as I said, they pay attention to who attends many of these, and they certainly pay attention to who would actually be traveling in. She wasn't the only one. There were different individuals from around the globe that traveled back, but much like, and I talked about in the opening scene of The Godfather, you have the daughter's wedding, and then outside you have the FBI is seeing who's attending the wedding, and it's leaders of the five families of organized crime. Well, it's kind of like that. They're noticing who's showing up for the funeral, because why would they be going? That is a tip-off, whether it's a funeral or whether it's a wedding. That's how they get a sense of who are some of the different people. And this is enacted, I'm sure they do it for cartel members. They certainly do it for gang members. They want to see who's going to be in attendance. She got flagged on that. But what I find is really been missing from the story was when Homeland Security was questioning her at Logan Airport. And they asked her, can we see your phone? She handed over her phone. Now, if she didn't go give over her phone, that's a reason to detain her or maybe even deport her. When they went through her phone, they found that she had, these are experts. She had deleted some things. What did she delete? She deleted some of the pictures from the funeral, some of these members of Hezbollah, which is an extension of terror group, extension of Iran. But it was the conversation of how she referred to them. And when they said, are you a follower of this terror leader? You flew back to Lebanon to attend the funeral. And she said, well, not as politics, but he's a spiritual leader to me. He's a religious leader. I laugh because that's actually more dangerous. That's how they talk. But what shouldn't be lost on you is that narrative, until the feds injected that was, not only was it lacking, but there didn't even seem to be any interest locally to get to the root cause. They seemed more interested in presenting a story that the Trump administration and they're out of control and they deported this poor professor and doctor and blah, 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 and they had a rally for at the State House. Folks, I mean, that's what Homeland Security does. If you've ever watched Homeland, the show that was on Showtime with Carrie and Saul, I mean, it was, really fascinating. And that's what our intelligence does. And our US intelligence and Homeland Security and, they CIA, and they have very sophisticated listing devices. They track certain individuals. And part of that, as much as people talk about how we haven't had a massive terror attack in our country since 9/11, that's not an accident. 9/11 was then the birth of the Department of Homeland Security, and that's what they do. So now, for the local media still seem to be insisting that this individual should be allowed back in. Oh, she should come back and be teaching at Brown and should be at Rhode Island Hospital. Folks, Hezbollah wants to, they're calling for the genocide of all Jews, let alone, just the a number of people that they're against, and the war against, as they call them, infidels. So I notice none of that is talked about. What I find missing from this uh, coverage on this Dr. Hezbollah, Raja, is they don't mention, notice there's no stories on the number of lives that Hezbollah, how many people they have killed and killed Americans. It's absent from the equation. And there's another part of this that I just want to touch on, folks. And again, at 1:28, this is the real news, this portion of our program. And it's brought to you on this first day of spring. And it's brought to you by Watson Materials. Folks, call Watson Materials today. And they are Rhode Island's, the largest selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson Materials. Call Sean, request a free quote, 401-885-0600. Watson Materials, the most complete selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island. You can get so much use of your outside with Watson Materials. And maybe you're in the business. They have landscape lighting, pavers, retaining walls, natural stone, cobblestone, decorative stone, Watson Materials. Look for them on Facebook or call them 401-885-0600. The people that are insisting that this doctor should be allowed back, I want to go back to, and this is something anyone that's ever studied immigration and the effects of immigration, it's twofold. Number one, you do get many people that come into our country, and specifically our state, and they are many times, not that well educated. They're certainly willing to do whatever job is available. I'll give them that. By the way, many individuals are brought in with special visas that do farm work, and I get that. I think that is terrific. But there's another aspect of this that no one talks about, and it's the brain drain on these other countries. When you take, let's just talk about Columbia or Harvard or Brown or Princeton or Yale or MIT, some of our elite universities, when many of these students come here and attend there from other countries, whether it's, Mexico, or maybe it's Colombia, or maybe in this case, it's Lebanon, they never go back. So there's a brain drain where our country, we draw people to Georgetown, and as I said, UPenn, and Princeton, and some of our top Ivy League universities. And these are individuals, and I see people putting comments, and I would tend to agree with it. I'm willing to bet that Lebanon needs doctors. Why can't she be a doctor in Lebanon? Why can't she, President Trump is talking about let's lure some of the best and brightest to the United States. I don't have a problem with that. But the way these people advocate, I'm willing to bet there are people in Lebanon that could use her as a doctor. And maybe she could even be at a university in Lebanon. And maybe there are people that we draw into our country that attend MIT and attend Brown or Princeton and some of our top universities, and their countries would be better served if they ran for office or they were a doctor or a lawyer or a college professor. So, but what I don't understand is the locals that are insisting that that individual should be here. And I just want to finish it by saying I find what she said to the members of Homeland Security, what she said, the local media keeps dwelling on she had pictures in her phone. And I mentioned that individual, Roger Williams, saying, well, if they look through my phone, to me, what's more frightening and got their attention was how she regarded these they're terrorists. They're brutal killers. They order death. That's what they're involved in. That's their trade. It'd be one thing if you attended the funeral of John Gotti and said, my family knew him and we never got involved in the business. I understand what he was involved in, but he, he knew my family. That's one thing. Then you have, there's that great scene again in The Godfather, Michael and Kay, where Michael is trying to say that Don Corleone, he's no different than a lot of political powerful people. And then Kay says, but Michael, presidents and senators and congressmen don't have men killed. And then Michael says the famous line, who's being naive, Kay? It would be different if someone views John Gotti as he's just a powerful leader and I like his teachings and I follow him like that, instead of he was a ruthless gangster who stole what he could, and he and Sammy the Bull, and they killed a lot of people. So it's my understanding what she said to Homeland Security was certainly caught their attention more than just some photos of some people at a soccer stadium waving flags. That to me is not explored in any way. And it also raises the question, she's a citizen of Lebanon. That is her loyalty. And I think those questions should be asked of various individuals. You're from Iran. Yes. What do you think of the supreme leader? I think he's this or that, or I'm against the oppression. You understand how they treat people in these? Clearly, many of these people don't. Especially the individual from Providence City Hall that went to Trump Tower last Thursday to get arrested. The individual, they, them, that wears a dress, they'd be thrown off the highest building in Gaza. Women don't have rights in these countries. Certainly, LGBTQ don't have rights in these countries. It's a different world that they even think that way. So I think my point is, I think some of these questions should be asked. How do you view them? And if you say, oh, they're a spiritual leader, I just follow their teachings, that's pretty frightening. Yeah, that's how a lot of the Manson family felt. Talking about, quote, Charlie. Oh, he's like a prophet. No, he's not. He's a drugged out lunatic. Maybe drugs fried his brain, or who knows what happened. But he just started ordering people to be killed, like pushing it to the nth degree. So my point, I think the Trump administration, I think they are onto something. It is surprising to me how much money many of these universities have been getting. And they're sitting on billions of dollars of an endowment. There's another big story. And I want to give credit to the Providence Journal, Katie Mulvaney, that I caught my eye on it. But folks, I want to remind you also, Kids Club on the Pike. Now remember, coming up, summer camp for Kids Club on the Pike. Now, Kids Club on the Pike, which is right on Plainfield Pike, and it is a birthday party venue. You could use that team celebration birthday party venue. They have before and after school care. They have preschool, but they also do summer camp. Kids Club on the Pike. Now, call Kristen. I just talked to her today. They're taking reservations now. At least call to find out more. Kids Club on the Pike, summer camp, 401-443-5600. 5336. Maybe it's for a week for your child. Maybe it's for a month. Maybe it's for the whole summer. They have to do something. Kids Club on the Pike, right on Plainfield Pike on the Cranston Johnston line, and they're right off of 295, centrally located. It's Kids Club on the Pike. I want to give partial credit, I should say, to the Providence Journal and Katie Mulvaney, who did a story. Now, I'm familiar with this organization, and the organization is, and I want to make sure I I just want to give the story full credence and credit on this, because this is another one of those groups that I had no idea. This is it. Dorcas International. Dorcas International. I'm very familiar with them. Dorcas International operates very effectively in Rhode Island. And let's just be, who are they dealing with? They deal with people that are in the country in Rhode Island illegally. For all kinds of things. There have been allegations that Dorcas International, that they also help people in the country register to vote. That's been going on for a very long time. I remember it's going back 10 years ago. Nellie Gorbea had a ceremony at the Rhode Island State House, and it features Dorcas International, and they were celebrating that they had registered 25,000 new people to vote, and they used translators. And now, folks, you have to step back. Where in Rhode Island would you find 25,000 new voters? That seems, if you went to Coventry and could get 500 new voters, it would be incredible. If you could find 1,000 new voters, 25,000 new voters, Dorcas International. But what stood out to me, I should say, with this article, and the purpose of the story, the theme of the story, essentially, is how, again, it's this narrative of, because of the Trump administration, Dorcas International is going to have to lay people off. And Dorcas International, the Rhode Island branch, who knew? They have over 100 people working for them. And it's nonsense. Rhode Island's largest immigration nonprofit. Notice they all claim it's nonprofit. They all claim it's nonprofit, because if it's nonprofit, they don't have to pay taxes. Rhode Island's largest, when you see the word immigration, we know what word is missing. Illegal. Faces layoffs amid Trump funding freeze. Dorcas International, even my eyes were open to this. On January 24th, staff members, Dorcas International, picked up, they always started with, we were picking up refugees from Afghanistan. Yeah, except most of the people they pick up are from Guatemala. President Trump executive order. For Dorcas, an abrupt stop to $1 million in annual funds used to help refugees in the first 90 days of settling. They're not here legally. They're not. So there's no rent money. There's no food. The executive director of Dorcas International. Now, I believe this woman, that program halted reception and placement run out of the State Department. In Rhode Island, let me just skip down. Dorcas International serves 6,000 illegals a year. It's already resulted in job cuts. The nonprofit, of course it's nonprofit. Then they can pay the director like $300,000, like the Crossroads. That's scam. The nonprofit, 105 employees. So they have a team of 105 people that are helping illegals get settled in the state. You never hear about that, do you? Now it's been cut down to 92. There's other funding still paused. They get Preferred Communities Program grant. $1.5 million from them. So now we're $2.5 million. How much money are they getting in grants? Listen to this. Cloutier, I think that's her name. Dorcas, federal funding were cut. Half. I didn't know this. And I follow it. I've discussed Dorcas with Terry Gorman. Of course, it's a nonprofit, so they don't have to pay taxes. $11.5 million budget. She's saying we're going to have to reduce the staff to 62 people. 62 people that our tax money is being used to help illegals. Almost 12 million. Oh, no, we're nonprofit. Yeah, I'm sure you are. The scams being uncovered. I mean, I don't, folks, here's the thing. Here's why President Trump and Elon Musk is, there's so many of these scams that are set up that, Sheldon Whitehouse, his wife grabbing millions. Oh, she's studying litter on the beach. Oh, is she an employee? No, she's a consultant. Oh, she's a consultant. How many hours a week? Well, she's just a consultant. So sometimes she works 1 hour a week. Sometimes she works more. But because she doesn't actually work for them, she's a consultant. She just gets a certain monthly stipend, whatever the hell it is. How many of these are there? I had no idea Dorcas International was getting all that federal money. I also want to be very clear. If there's private groups, private organizations that are donating that type of money, I mean, I don't like it, but I had no idea that our money, that's a lot of money. And who's accounting for all of this? Over 100 people? Did you know that? Over 100 people are on the payroll to help illegals in Rhode Island. That is absurd. I'm willing to bet they know that at the Rhode Island State House. Isn't that interesting how no one talks about that at the Rhode Island State House? No one dug in on the Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the wife grabbing all that money. Millions. Ludicrous. I don't want my money going to that. And Elon Musk is paying a heavy price with his, Tesla, with what people are, destruction of them. I think he does have a problem, by the way, because the Trump, quote, MAGA crowd, I don't think they're the Tesla crowd. I think they like their Ford F-150s. I mean, I like Elon Musk. I admire him. I respect him, but I'm not going to go out and buy a Tesla. And not because they're being vandalized or anything, but a friend of mine got it. He said the car is so heavy. A friend of mine got a Tesla. He had 3 flat tires within the first 18 months because they're so heavy. So he got rid of it. I don't know. Maybe I'd feel differently if I test drove it. But Elon Musk, it is a form of terrorism in how they're doing all that destruction. But he is remarkable what he is uncovering. And there's so much money wasted. And it's a scheme. And it's funneled back to them. The other day, I think on Monday, Rhode Island, former Rhode Island Congressman, David Cicilline, now at the Rhode Island Foundation, he was a guest on Channel 12. And I don't understand the nature of it, but it was in the 4:00 hour, and we give money to this, and we give grants for that. And keep in mind, he is giving out favors with the intent to then, if Senator Reid announces he's not running, Cicilline would go for that Senate seat. And he would probably be a tough person amongst the Democrats. But what I found interesting was I didn't hear a disclaimer, because Cicilline and the Rhode Island Foundation, I've seen their ads during Newsmakers on Channel 12. I don't know why they didn't mention, why is he was there. There's no apparent reason. It was just kind of like a BS PR thing. We give money for this, we give money for that, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't mention he helps fund a news program, by the way, which I like, Newsmakers with Ted Nesi and Tim White. I don't know why they didn't mention that, because to me, that's why they were then having him as a guest at 4 o'clock. That was my takeaway. Folks, this portion of the program, I want to remind you about quality asphalt seal coating. Call Corey, 401-283-9815. 401-283-9815. Quality asphalt seal coating. They seal coat driveways and parking lots. They offer crack filling, pothole repair, line striping. They make your pavement look like new. They can resurface basketball courts, tennis courts, pickleball courts. They epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring. Call Corey, request a quote, quality asphalt seal coating, 401-283-9815. Make a huge difference with your basketball court, tennis court, pickleball court. 401-283-9815. I do share their Facebook page. Now, first day of spring, NCAA tournament is in town, and I think it's fantastic. And it showcases, as Dan McGowan said of the Boston Globe, without question, Providence drew the best draw for the first round. You have three incredible coaches, St. John's Redmen, Rick Pitino in town. Rick Pitino talking up how he was the coach of Providence, how he said at they did a press conference when they arrived. He said, how did it feel to be back on Rhode Island? Even though St. John's does play PC, but he said, I love it. When I was the coach of Kentucky in the 90s, my family and I used to vacation for 3 weeks in Newport. Coach John Calipari posted a thing, feels good to be back on Federal Hill. And then the coach of Kansas is a big time coach. And so, folks, again, I'm not delusional. I'm not trying to look for negative things. I think it's great for downtown. I hope the downtown businesses do fantastic. I hope it's a moneymaker for them. I hope many of the people from St. John's. Now, Coach Calipari is the coach of Arkansas. There's a video that went online where he's talking to the team and he says, we're going to Providence. And one of the kids on the Arkansas team says, where's that? And then Coach John Calipari, who was the coach at UMass, and then he was also the coach at Kentucky, he said, it's in the United States. Like, look at a map. But I think all of that is a positive. And I'll tell you, as I said, there's no one enjoying this more than Rhode Island Governor Dan McKay, because our problem as a state, our problem is that's all he wants to do. He'll be sitting courtside. He'll go out to dinner. I'm sure he and his staff, go into the coach. The governor of the state wants a photo picture. Oh, absolutely. Bring him in. So, but I think it's a good reprieve. That's what the next, it's today. They'll be in town Friday. Two teams leave. And then there's 2 games tonight. The 2 teams that win play on Saturday. And then the winner advances to the Final Four. So I think it's all positive, and the city could use a boost. Anything to help the businesses, whether it's the restaurants on Federal Hill or the restaurants and bars. Certainly the hotels are packed. Plus you have the TV crews. Plus you have all the NCAA people. And this could be beneficial. St. John's fans that say, hey, I live in New York. I've never been to Rhode Island before. We're going to come back and visit, or I've heard a lot about Narragansett, or I've heard about Newport, whatever. I think all that is positive. So I think the next 3 days, it is a positive. But our problem is once they leave, we're still stuck with, I agree with Mike Chippendale. We still don't have answers on what exactly happened with why those pallet shelters cost so much. We don't have any answers on that. We still have no idea about the bridge. And I don't know, the finances of the entire state are in question. So I think it is very positive for the state over the next couple of days to have people come in, and maybe, it'll motivate someone to say, this could be a better place. So maybe I will get involved. Maybe I will run for office. I don't know. We can dream. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by Modern Mechanical. Now remember, call them if they are central air conditioning installation, Modern Mechanical. Central air repair and maintenance, ductless air conditioning. Ductless air conditioning repair and maintenance, boiler installation, boiler repair and maintenance, furnace repair and maintenance. Modern Mechanical. Call them today, 401 441 5442, 401 441 5442 for Modern Mechanical. Now, it's a late tip. St. John's is scheduled to play tonight, I think at around 9:42. That can even go later. So we're definitely doing Road Patrol live later. And I think, again, anything to help the businesses, because you don't hear anyone really in our area. You don't hear any elected officials speaking up on behalf of the business community. The only ones that I hear are the House Republicans, Mike Chippendale, and I'm glad with his leadership, they stood up to the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce and called them out for not being more supportive of local business. Senate Minority Leader Jessica De La Cruz, she did the opposite. She caved. She caved and went to their little dog and pony show and said, "Oh yeah, everything's great. Everything's great. They don't do anything for small business." So I said at the time, I thought that was a big mistake by her, and I remain believing that that was a mistake, because we there should be an easier, more friendly business climate than what exists right now. You also have, I think next week, Hasbro is going to announce that they're bolting for Boston. Governor McKee didn't want that to be the story with his reelection bid announcement, and then he didn't want it with the NCAA in town. But it's going to be a reality. It's going to be a reality. So I'm glad for all the people that are coming in from out of town, and then some of the other people that are going to enjoy it. Now, I also want to mention, I did receive an email from Deb. Deb was asking about who is it that I mentioned design builders. Deb, it's Arch Design Builders. They specialize in residential design. It is the dream team of Roxanne and Ed of Arch Design Builders. Call them today, 401 207 4124. 401 207 4124. Arch Design Builders. Now, whether you're thinking of a new kitchen or a new bathroom, basement, deck, or a special project, give them a call. It all starts with the phone call, because then that leads to the free, let's have a meeting, free consultation and meeting. Arch Design Builders. Call Roxanne, 401 218 9707. I share both their Facebook and Instagram page. It's Arch Design and Builders. Well, folks, good afternoon. I want to just get up to speed. I always like to make sure that I don't miss any news that is coming down, at least not locally. I did want to pull up and see the whole thing yesterday with my Representative Chippendale. That then became a little confusing as the afternoon went on, when it wow, here's a headline. The Rhode Island Education Commissioner, 15% of the state school budget comes from the Department of Education, of which they're eliminating. Good. So what does that mean? It means you don't need all these people with these high-paying jobs. It means you don't just keep funneling money unnecessarily to the teachers' unions. Folks, public education is broken. Public school experiment in Rhode Island has failed. And so the Rhode Island Department of Education, or I should say the Department of Education, 15% of their school district budget comes from the Department of Education. 275 million. But the fact of the matter is, where does that money go? The public school experiment in the state has failed. And we need school choice. If you send your child to a Catholic school or a private school, that's where the money should follow. And let alone with the homeschooling. I want to just, let's see. The AMP nearly full first game of the day, Purdue High Point. Can't imagine other venues this close to capacity out of the gate. All right, so they're playing right now. Providence is looking good in the March Madness broadcast. Camera set up on the pedestrian bridge pointed toward the city skyline. That is a nice shot. Let's see. Checked in with Bryant as they roll into the NCAA. It's a family affair in Smithfield. As the final minutes melted off the clock, the tears started flowing. All right, so Bryant, I think they have a tough draw, but certainly glad that they are also involved with NCAA March Madness, like many of you, that I also really enjoy. Let me just see if there's any other news that I want to, let's see. Let's see. The Celtics were sold. AMP. Let me just think of anything else. I know I don't say anything. The stuff about McKee, folks, you're going to see him front and center, and he certainly is going to try to gravitate towards Pitino, who is still a beloved figure. I'm not going to mention and dwell on the fact that in the past number of years, both PC and URI had an opportunity to hire Coach Rick Pitino, and they both passed. I'm not even going to, what's the point in mentioning it? Next year, both PC and URI at this time are going to be hiring new coaches. Could have had Rick Pitino. Folks, it's water under the bridge. This portion of the program brought to you by J. Perry Paving. Call them 401-732-1730. Letter J. J. Perry Paving. High quality, fair pricing. And remember, J. Perry Paving has a special package for veterans. Free estimate, any project, letter J. J. Perry Paving. Call them 401-732-1730. If you're a veteran or a family member is a veteran, no one has a better deal and package for you than J. Perry Paving. Call them again, 401-732-1730. Free quote, free estimate, high quality. Look for them on Facebook. It's letter J. It's J. Perry Paving. I think Representative Chippendale, him drawing attention to the pallet shelter and still not having the answers, there's still a lot of unanswered questions about it. I know as the day went along, the story didn't fully shake out, I don't think, the way that he initially thought, because it sounded like he did have some of the information that he was requesting. But listen, I still think it was a big move, and someone has to hold Governor Meeke accountable, especially and answer some questions as to why that went millions over budget. All right, folks, on this Thursday, first day of spring, thank you for tuning in. We will be doing Road Patrol Live later. If you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. But again, big couple of days in Providence at the Civic Center, at the AMP with March Madness. Enjoy this first day of spring.